when we were actually trying to master the cars we had, rather than trying to discuss and moan about them not feeling as we expect the real car.
And the line you take is always kind of scripted, as people would say, so it's always the same where the grip actually is.
The sort of fundamental physics are like say, Assetto Corsa for the most part, but without Assetto Corsa's slippy curbing.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nitro Nights about a topic that's been haunting us for years now. Where's the development in sim racing? That's what we'll be talking about with René Buttler and G2's Nils Naujoks. But before we really dive into it, quick reminder for you guys to subscribe to our channel. And if you like what you see, make sure to also hit that like button. The biggest and most renowned title in our community is iRacing, a giant, but definitely not new. The game is more than 10 years old by now and still dominates the scene. We will talk about this and more with our guests here in our studio for the first time in ages, and we also brought in GamerMuscle for his take. But before we say hi to them, let's first take a look at how we ended up in this place.
13 years have passed since the first players revved up their engines in iRacing and who still continue to do so today. But iRacing isn't alone in this regard. The still popular R-Factor 2 and the original Assetto Corsa also still hold up, despite their respective 7 and 8 years of age. It's a longevity that doesn't come by remaining the same game over all this time. Adding new tracks and cars is only one small part of the picture. These tracks, for example, aren't just any normal tracks. They're laser scanned to get them as close to the real deal as possible. Probably the biggest breath of fresh air on the scene came with the release of Assetto Corsa Competizione 3 years ago. But even a new game didn't change that much in and of itself. It offers new and different tracks as well as cars, some touch-ups on the physics and updated graphics. But when we look for real innovation in the genre, the question is, what is that even? Is it the implementation of VR? Assetto Corsa already had this since its early access in 2013, a beloved feature for some, but not exactly earth-shaking. Would even more immersion via a motion platform be the next big thing for a sim? Or would it be something completely different in a game? Right now, the already established titles add more and more content and get even more bizarre through the community and modding scene. But what the future and the next big revolution of the genre will be is anyone's guess.
So now that we're up to date, of course, I myself have not been in sim racing for that long. We do have some experts on the topic here. Of course, we are all vaccinated, but we are finally here back in the studio with a couple of guests. And with that, of course, Nils and René, thanks for being here. If anybody's wondering, well, why is René here again? He usually hosts this stuff as well. He was just in town, and of course, he's that OG when it comes down to sim racing. He's been in the scene for far too long. And with that, we'll have to see. I mean, he's already been relegated to just hosting most of the time. And of course, moved up in the world as well when it comes down to doing real motorsports as well. What was your first sim?
That was a long intro to tell people I'm just old.
Yeah, I know.
Really nice.
They could have just showed a picture.
Yeah, it's like, just show my face in a close-up and people know that I'm old. What was the question, though?
What your first sim was?
My first sim? Probably Microprose Grand Prix, I would say, because I drove that before diving into Live for Speed, which was one of the first competitive back then. Yeah, so it was probably that, F1. What else?
So where did you start, Nils?
Must have been close to that, but I guess where you draw the line to actual being a sim. Of course, they tried what they could at the time, but probably hardly anything qualifies as a sim. But I actually started with Grand Prix 2, then moved to Grand Prix 1. Because then I don't know, it just happened. And there were IndyCar games, 1 and 2 as well at the time. Must be close to.
Oh yeah, you could go the wrong way around in the oval and just crash everyone. Loved that as a kid. Yeah, Wouldn't do that on iRacing.
Online lobbies.
Nowadays, just saying.
I feel the IndyCar games had the better crash mode. It was more satisfying to crash onto the other cars. But there was also Blyfus, for example, and a couple Sega Rally games or so. So I don't really know what the first one was. I played them all. El Unser Junior Racing.
All right, so of course, a long way to evolve since
that
then.
wasn't even 3D, just so that you know.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we have to touch base on is basically how have racing games, how Sims have evolved. It's just, of course, Sims, basically physics, but a big part of it, almost realistic these days. or close to it. And of course, graphics. Some sims still lacking behind on the graphics part as well. But I mean, when it comes down to just games as well, the graphics some days is just more realistic than even real life, it feels like.
I mean, we waited in the scene a long time for that, right? Because even when Live for Speed was the big competitive title that everyone was playing in the sim racing world, we always saw the difference to FPS titles, right? They looked great back then already. Crysis, for example, and the Cry engine. And we always dreamed about one day having a racing title that finally looks great. We have them, a ton of them nowadays. They all look great.
Pretty sure Scorn is sending me a message right now.
Really, like, it looked good for the time, though. Yeah. I mean, we got transparent windows on LFS S2, so that was a great achievement, but it just wasn't there with FPS titles, right? And nowadays, they look really, really good, and we're there with the mainstream games in general, which I absolutely appreciate. And in terms of physics, yeah, we came a long way, definitely. Although I have to say, and that might be controversial, I enjoyed the times back then when we were actually trying to master the cars we had, rather than trying to discuss and moan about them not feeling as we expect the real car to, because we never did that in the past. We were never racing the FZR and discussing like, oh, that doesn't
drive like a Porsche.
Drive like a Porsche. No, we just tried to be the best on the cars, and I really like that.
Of course, in the development of Sims, iRacing by now, sure, always gets the updates, always kind of changes, but as well, has there been some kind of lacking innovation as well from that?
Probably a bit far-fetched, if you ask me. I mean, all those games are developing, and there's a lot of path dependency, I guess, right? Wherever they started from in a particular game, they build on that. And it probably traces back 10 years by now, so that you just have systems in the game that you still rely on, that you still change or something, but there's always something fundamental that kind of stays in there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. They're just, like, I think these days, I'm just looking at these sims, they all have their specifics. Some do one thing great, some do another thing great. I wouldn't necessarily say some are lacking in a particular department. For example, ACC looks stunning. I'm sometimes squinting at my screen when the sun comes around, right? Because it's blinding. But then on iRacing, for example, you have this buttery smooth feeling with rock solid FPS stuck at 120 or whatever you need, basically. So yeah, everything comes at advantages and disadvantages, I guess.
Talking about current titles, at this stage right now, what is kind of your favorite? Let's maybe start with Nils.
Easy for me, I think. I like the depth of one particular car that I can drive for an entire year without getting bored, which is an ACC. So yeah, that's my favorite. That's the answer.
Whatever I say now,
is it just real car racing?
Bad, right? It's like I wonder what I could say. Okay, the title I most enjoy currently, what is it? I really enjoy endurance racing on R-Factor 2. Obviously, my team does a lot in that regards. And I really enjoy sprint racing in ACCs. Like, I was always more of a sprint racer. I don't want the entire thing around. I just want wheel-to-wheel banging racing, right? Still trying to dream about one day killing Nils Naujoks in turn 1. I never touched him in the Pro Series back then because he was way too far away. So maybe in ACC I could do it. Because ACC is dynamic enough, right? Like it gives you the feeling that every lap you have to adjust something, which is like in real life. And that's something I really disliked about the past of sim racing. It was basically hot lapping, right? So if one day you figured out how to do it the best way, you just replicate that 300 times. That is a skill. Definitely a skill you mastered back then, no question. But it wasn't what you would do on a real track. And I absolutely love that about ACC, and obviously I ran into the Kunos guys quite a lot. They're doing an awesome job there, and I just hope that we go into that direction. Like, I want to get away from hot lapping, and I want to see more randomness in that case, basically. I want drivers to, every single lap, have to think about, does the car still work that way? Is the corner still grippy as it was previously? And the more we get there, the cooler the racing will be.
Is there anything that you guys miss, for example, in ACC that you have in an iRacing or an R-Factor?
I mean, speaking of the variability and changeable track, then that's certainly something that is still... I know Kunos wants to have that ideally, but for whatever reason, it's not realistic to have that right now. But of course, the track progresses, but at a certain point, it's optimal, right? Unless the rain comes, yada, yada, yada. But And the line you take is always kind of scripted, as people would say. So it's always the same where the grip actually is. And it doesn't depend on where the cars actually drive. That's maybe the only shortcoming the game kind of has in that regard. So yeah, that would be one thing that could still come for the future, I'd say.
So we just have to mix that because R-Factor 2 has that, right? It, like the line builds up
if
where
you
people
manage
drive.
to start the game, yes. Cut, sorry.
What else missing in sim racing titles? I think more of the gamification around it. Not saying that this is now the best example in terms of how they do it, but they try, and that would be Codemasters F1. For example, in the career mode, making sure that there's a reason for you to run free practice, because you have these mini games, that we'll call them now, right? Where you try to run a specific time or with a specific tire and stuff like that. And personally, I miss the evolution in sim racing titles in terms of everything around it. Let's be real, all of the titles from back then to now have the same menu. It's like single player champion, hot lap, multiplayer, maybe a ranked system or whatever it is. That's it. The career modes still look the same.
We're kind of copying real life racing.
Yeah, but even there, I think we could do more because there's way more around. Even look at FIFA nowadays, right? Even they do in the career mode. There's like management stuff around it and stuff like that.
You go to your backyard and play 5v5.
Yeah, it's like what. Backyard racing might look a bit weird. So we bring breakfast into this, no problem at all. No, I just think we could do more to ensure that people have more fun around it, because I see it with my drivers as well. I guess that's the same for you guys. Sometimes it is a bit frustrating to just do the usual league practice and running on your closed server and never have that public fun that we had in the past, because we met all of the drivers from the entire series somewhere throughout the week because we were playing on public servers and they were all there. And sometimes I think it would be great to go back to that.
Thanks for joining us here in the studio. It's great to have guests back in and not only have them back on the big screen. With that, though, of course, this is kind of your stage now to plug anything that's coming up. What do you have? Any races that are coming up?
Totally. We're just probably past the ACC season for now, so I'll actually look at iRacing a bit and do the VCO Pro Sim series. We're gonna partner up with a couple of real racers who are eager to spend their off days racing as well. So that's coming up, and then we're planning something for next year already.
All right.
Next year, there's obviously a big World Cup in terms of sim racing, right? We're looking forward to that one, which will be interesting across multiple games. And on the other hand, we're doing real racing, right? I think we're the only sim racing team that does real racing with the same sim racers. So we just finished our season there with a 3-hour race that was this weekend. First one for us in the rain. Was cool.
Now that we've heard the opinions of René and Nils, let's take a look at what GamerMuscle and Ermin have to say about this as well.
Biggest improvement in driving sims from the older driving sims to the newer ones. Obviously, the graphics have improved a lot, especially in that gap between the earlier games to sort of Assetto Corsa.
Oh, that's like asking how long is a piece of string. It kind of depends where you're looking and what you're looking for. I think in terms of, if you're thinking of physics innovation, it almost feels like we stalled somewhere about half a decade ago and all the movements have been kind of lateral rather than incrementally positive. Maybe the one exception to this has been ACC, that's kind of incrementally been making positive physics upgrades over countless updates now. It's gone tremendous benefits from the release version to where we are right now. So it kind of depends what you're looking for and I guess what you're hoping to get out of sim racing. But I think in terms of the physics realism experience, it is a little more stagnant than I would personally like.
Laser scan tracks were definitely a big advancement because that adds a lot of immersion. It makes the tracks, you get a better road surface texture, and obviously everything lines up perfectly. You go to a real world track now, and you in real life, and you play a laser scan track. It's like the set is creepy. It's so similar. It's mad. So laser scan tracks, graphics, laser scan tracks. In terms of physics, I think more sims are actually getting better at not being too unforgiving, or sims are allowing you to actually drive a car at the limit properly. Especially, I mean, Live for Speed actually got this really well done, and the really good cars in Automobilista did this. But especially the first Assetto Corsa absolutely nails the fact that a real car is not that hard to drive without spinning if you know how to balance a car, even a race car. Online racing recently has definitely had a lot of development. and you starting to see that sort of the online ranking component of the online racing, that sort of ranked lobbies or organized online ranking. So iRacing obviously did it early on when it first launched, and iRacing nailed that component of, we have hourly races, or there's a race that's going on, you register up to it, and it puts you into splits. Basically exactly the same as how Rocket League works, CSGO works, or any functioning high-skill competitive game works. iRacing nailed that early on, and I think now we have started to see, rFactor 2 starting to implement it. Race Room has got a sort of simplified version that works really quite well, to be honest, where they just have lobbies you can join into and it tracks your rating. What are most sims missing?
Well, again, it depends on what each person wants, but for me, it's always about the physics. I sim race because I want the next best thing to actually driving a car hard on the limit in real life. So that's all that matters to me. So I think the next big innovation I want is just the unification of all those good elements, like the really nice aero maps from ACC, the really nice manufacturer data from ACC with maybe a physical tire model like iRacing or rFactor, but actually, dialed to act semi-realistically. That would be really good, and just a coming together of all the best minds that we have in sim racing to really take it to the next level.
It's a sim that gets all the fundamentals correct is missing, so they don't have to do it the best, but a sim that has iRacing's online matchmaking system, a sim that has force feedback that's as good as like AC's force feedback, or good cards in rFactor 2's force feedback, and a sim that has a sort of end drive, or the tire model, the sort of fundamental physics are like say Assetto Corsa for the most part, but without Assetto Corsa's slippy curbing. So it's a sim that basically combines, hits the minimum threshold of quality for the different components.
That's it already for today's Nitro Night show. As always, I really hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you have any feedback, just let us know down in the comments below. As always, don't forget to check out overtake.gg for more amazing sim racing content. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, stay safe and buckle up. If you want to see more of Nils, don't worry, we've got you covered. Why not check out our series Hero's Journey, where he coaches James Bardolph to become a sim racer over here, or take a look at last week's episode where it's all about content creation with our new face of Overtake, Ermin, over here. And of course, enjoy watching and see you next time.